this is Mike Byrnes with another episode of Business Bests. Previously, I did a recording on how to find the members of the media. This recording is going to be specifically about how not to ruin those relationships. I've created this big long list of ways that I've seen people completely damage relationships with the press, and I don't want you to do that. So I'm going to go through them one by one, maybe tell you some funny stories here and there, but hopefully you'll find this pretty helpful. One is to not spray your information all over, the whole spray and pray tactic. I see too often that people just blast their information out everywhere. The whole sending something that is about Mother's Day to a tech reporter is not going to do well at all, right? Or, you get the idea. Like if you're not sending, you have a journalist that's specific and they cover a specific topic, but you're sending something completely not of interest to them, it's not going to work. And guess what? They'll flag you as spam, and then you'll never get in their in-bin again. So be really selective of who you message. That whole, idea of the press release blast, that can still work to a certain degree. But even when you build out your database, you don't want to send the press release to the wrong person, right? Because there are too many times that's just going to be annoying to the person. And again, does not help you to get blacklisted. With paying attention to the journalist and knowing what they're interested in, there's a bit of work there too. I will tell you that I've worked with so many journalists over the years. They move like kind of musical chairs a lot. Unfortunately, some publishers go out of business. Other media outlets are struggling or whatever it might be, or they're morphing or they're changing, or maybe that one beat or that topic that they cover just isn't that drawing in that many viewers or listeners or readers anymore, so they've shifted it. So I will tell you, the whole musical chairs, people are switching constantly. So to not only to know, do you still have the right contact information for that media person that you're trying to reach? That's one issue, especially if they've switched jobs. But two is, have they moved to cover a different topic within that media outlet? So for example, you might be a business-oriented person and you're trying to go into the finance section of a magazine, but oh, by the way, now that person's moved to the lifestyle team. And so if you don't actually spend time keeping your list up to date, you will fall behind. So it's just something to be aware of. It's not something you have to do all the time. Quarterly, maybe at most, but it definitely yearly, you should be kind of making sure that your list is still accurate. The more generic your pitch, I guess you could think of the more beneficial it would be, because the more people would be of interest, but you really become irrelevant. Like you're not specific enough for them to take interest. So if you narrow your scope too much, you might really close the potential of getting press hits. Like, you've now had this universe of 50,000 journalists, and now you got so specific, you got it down to 10. But that could be a good thing, right? If you know who that 10 is, you're going to be more likely to get the press. Then you have that generic approach, and you try to shoot it out to the whole world. I'm cautioning you what you're trying to do. I'd have to talk to you specifically one-on-one to know what your philosophy there is. But I would say most often being generic is going to backfire. It's just not going to be successful. Failing to research the member of the press that you're going to reach out to is a big, big mistake. And it's really common. We're really busy. We don't really have time to do that. You want to actually know what that journalist has recently covered. So one, we just talked about, you need to have their contact information, know that they're still there. But let's say they are there. You pitch an idea about something that's going on in the economy and how it impacts your day-to-day world and your clients, but they just wrote about that yesterday. And now you pitch to them that same idea. It's not going to go over well, right? So use that research to your benefit and actually be able to have your own spin on it, come up with some unique angle, or come up with something completely different that doesn't compete with it. That is crucial research that I would say that you want to do. it also helps when you're contacting that journalist to say, hey, I read your last article on such and such, and I really loved it. I especially love the part on X, Y, and Z. You know what? They're going to feel pretty valued. Journalists as a whole get a lot of negative pressure, a lot of negative feedback. Editorial people are always cutting down their work and changing and all that. A journalist is not an easy job. And so when you think about how to build up the relationship, part of it is building them up. And so if you have done your research, you now have more ability to have a real credible thank you or kind comment that you can make. Just say, hey, it means a lot to me that you cover this industry. I think you do it really well, and I'd be honored if you wanted to work with me as a resource. That type of conversation is a great way to start with working with the press. So tailoring the message is really important. That research can help with that, but research can help you with the personal side of things too. So we'll talk about it more and more, but the stronger that relationship is with the media on a human basis, the more likely you are going to get positive press, the more likely you're going to get more press. All kind of great things happen when you have a good human relationship and you make that personal connection. So back to research, one of the things you want to do is maybe connect with them on Facebook, know who they are, pay attention to what they're posting. Are they family oriented? Did they just go on a trip? What are they sharing about themselves that you can make a personal connection with them, or at least ask them questions? Hey, what's going on in your world? I did see you just went on a trip overseas. I'd love to hear about it. I know you're busy, but maybe just share what was your best part about it, or can you share a picture or something like that? That it's something that's quick. And if they have a slow day, maybe they'll kind of go and elaborate, and they'll talk. As they elaborate, they'll maybe talk for 10 minutes about a thing, and hopefully you have the time to listen to that. But that personal relationship side only happens with a little bit of research. The other thing I would say is don't forget all these details. In your CRM, you should be putting the members of press in there and recording all the details about them. But actually, with AI note takers and such, you can actually populate automatically the transcript or the summary of the information. I'm pretty weak at remembering names, so say they mention the kids' names or maybe some conference they're going to be at or whatever. Let the note taker record that for you. That could be really valuable information. Your CRM, not utilizing the CRM, we've talked about that before, but a big mistake would be to not follow up on these things that they mention. They're going to allow you to have business and personal ways to keep that relationship strong. Whatever that conversation is, make sure you take notes on that and then create a CRM field that you can capture that, but actually create the trigger too, like something that's going to remind you to do it. You're going to be in California for such and such conference in December. I need to send a note at the end of November to say, hey, are you still going to that? Or love to meet you while you're there. When it's kind of closer to the date, that's going to make your efforts more successful. Another flaw that I see when we're working in the press is being boring. The people that are more successful in the press are, I don't know if it's flamboyant or they're more energized or they just kind of carry themselves a certain way. They have those bigger than life kind of personalities and everybody kind of wants to be around them or is just like hanging on the next word that they say. So if you're boring and monotone, if you're actually getting interviewed, that could be something that is just kind of disastrous. So make sure you have some energy when you're talking to these people. Imagine someone that has to interview people all week long, every week of the month, every month of the year, and they've done it for years and years and years. Kind of make it a little bit more fun for them and more exciting, and then have that personality that is someone that media person wants to make a human connection with. Whatever you're talking about too, it can't be boring from a topic standpoint too, right? So it has to be compelling or has to be newsworthy. If you're just kind of saying the same old thing that everybody else could regurgitate, that doesn't do the member of the press any favors, right? So you have to have an opinion. You have to have some unique insight, some expertise that maybe the outside world doesn't have, or at least isn't covered in that article or news segment that they're working on. So make sure you're not boring for a few different reasons, personality-wise, but also from a business side of things too. This one thing is a huge no-no, and it happens all throughout the industry, and it's don't harass the press. They get bombarded in email, bombarded in social media, they get bombarded on the phone. So if you're getting kind of lumped into that harassing kind of category, they're going to blacklist you, right? Like I need to get some time away from that person. So they shut you off, and then maybe you never get back in, right? So be careful. You don't want to automatically start to going into their spam folder with email or social media. They're just never going to open your stuff, or they see your phone number calling all the time on caller ID. They're not going to pick it up. Just be careful, right? So a lot of times now they're actually using handheld devices. So they're using, their smartphones. So they'll have saved your contact information. Texting is something that you might or might not want to do with the members of the press, depending if they're open to that. Again, another thing, you just don't want to bombard them and be over the top. Texting does allow a couple more frequent check-ins because it's kind of short and to the point. So balance what you're doing with your overall harassment strategy. You don't want to be harassing, and it happens all the time. Another one related to this is not being patient. Sometimes someone will send a press release and then they call 1 minute later to find out if it's been covered. You got to give the members of the press some time to digest these things. There are tools when you send things out, you can know if somebody opened it. So you can know if the journalist is in the moment. And yes, there's a benefit of reaching out to them right as they're in the moment, or as they've just initially seen what you've sent them. But be careful. If they think that you're seeing that type of information, they're going to be scared to open it the next time you send something. So be careful on how you let them know that you knew that they were digesting your content or opening your email or whatever it might be. There are social tools, for example, like LinkedIn. If you message a reporter, it will kind of show you to the side that they've seen that message. So you can use that stuff to your advantage. Sometimes it's nice to know that you are not hearing back from somebody because they just didn't open your message or your email or listen to your voicemail. Sometimes you can get the tools that tell you that stuff. Other times you can't. I did a whole video segment on personalized video emails, and the tool that I would recommend is one that will actually give you the reporting if they open the email and if they watched your video. It can be really valuable, but again, figure out what the right amount of time it is. If you're too impatient, you're just going to upset the reporter and it's going to backfire on you. One thing that you also don't want to do is put urgent, ASAP, breaking news, and just always be like overusing that type of stuff. Like if it's not really powerful, hard news, so that's where a press release might work. Like hard news means it's real news that the whole industry needs to know, right? And you're going to blast it out to the whole world because it is that kind of thing that everyone's going to want to write about. That's where you might want to put something about that, like big news or urgent news or, open ASAP or, there are all kinds of things you can put in the title. Sometimes the email services will flag it and you'll get caught in spam if you kind of overdo that. So just don't overuse that. If it's not really kind of breaking news and you put that in the subject head and they open it, it's going to be a huge letdown. And that negative feeling the press has when they realize that they've been let down or hoodwinked in some ways, it's going to backfire on what you're trying to do. So it's just going to make you less successful. One related thing to that is don't overuse all caps. If you're sending out an email, a lot of times people will put their subject line in all caps, or they'll put in the press release all kinds of all caps. The person that gets it's like, why is this person screaming at me? It is a little bit of an attention getter, so sometimes it can benefit you to put in something, just maybe one word or a phrase at the most in all caps. Just be cautious of how you use that. I do see that too often, that like people are just trying to make it seem like they get the biggest and best news. So they use these words that are kind of overbilling what they're sharing, and they use a font or something that just makes it look like, hey, that is something that's going to be really exciting and wonderful to open, and then it really isn't. So be careful you don't kind of overdo it in the way that you communicate with your contacts. A real common one is to be too much of an expert or use industry jargon or something like that. If you are talking with a member of the press, yes, they might cover that industry, but they haven't worked in it forever, or they didn't get the degree or the certification or whatever that you have. So the people that sometimes over talk to the reporter or the member of the media, they miss the mark. And by the way, the audience probably is going to miss the mark too. Even if they quoted you as is, you're not going to be as successful. So avoid being that like over the top expert. I think you don't want to water things down too much that you're not getting your message across, or you're kind of diluting your expertise. But I think usually that's less of an issue. More of an issue is that you kind of come across as a know-it-all, or you just talk in words that nobody understands, right? So, for me, if I was going to pitch a member of the press on an AI topic, and I put in all this industry jargon about all the different ways that the technological side of things is advancing so fast that's how it's going to be important, that's why they need to cover it, that can be maybe successful. But if I put in more of a story, the whole stories tell and facts tell and stories sell. I can't remember who came up with that, but sometimes to be able to have people absorb things, they need an anecdote or they need something that will make it digestible for them. When you're working with a member of the press, don't be afraid to say, hey, please stop me if I'm saying anything that doesn't make any sense. And that's a good way to think about what you're trying to get across. Are you connecting with them? Are they understanding it? You can kind of read, if it's a live interview, you can kind of read the room, so to speak, and see where they are. Are they engaging? And so that goes to the next thing I would say is work on your speed of speech. So if you are doing a phone interview and you can hear them typing, and you're just whizzing away, there's no way they're going to be able to keep up with it. If they're doing an audio recording, that might be a little bit better where you could talk fast. But I know these CEOs are really important types that might, I've helped get them the interviews before, and I sometimes sat in on a 3-way interview as the member of the media to represent that client of mine. They start talking so fast, that the press is not going to keep up at all. So now they're like on idea 10, and the journalist is either on idea 1 or 10, like you don't know. And so coming up for air and having those pauses is super important. And you can say also things like, hey, that was what I wanted to cover on topic A, but I want to pause to say, do you have any questions on topic A before I go to topic B? They'll love you for that. Or just say, hey, I'm going to pause and let you catch up. And if you need me to repeat any of that, I would be glad to. Or if you have a follow-up question on anything I just said, I'll just be quiet. And then got to be quiet. Like I've actually trained people to do that type of technique when getting interviewed, and they can't stand the dead air. The member of the media will come up and talk. So once you say, I'll pause and let you write or catch up, then you can't say another word until they re-engage. And so be patient, have the right ability to talk at a certain pace. One thing I will also not make the mistake of thinking is that they're going to write down every word correctly. So there are times where you really want something to be captured. And so one technique that I would recommend is you repeat it. Say, I want to repeat that because I think that's probably one of the more important things I'm going to say. And then pause. Let them kind of catch up and be like, and then put in that thing that you repeat. That technique more than likely gets that little soundbite populated into whatever you're doing. Radio program, TV, or might be an article. Most likely that's the best technique for an article. So make sure you go at the right pace. Make sure you're giving them kind of these heads up when you're going to go down to topic B, and then also let them know, like, hey, here's the thing that I think is the most important. Let me repeat that, or let me say that again. The use of off the record is a big mistake too. I'll see that people will have actually been on interviews where I'm the member of the press, or I'm actually, sometimes I've been interviewing, or sometimes I've been representing a client that's talking with the member of the press, and the person will go blah, 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 and oh, by the way, that's off the press. I'm like, no, it isn't. You said it. You're in an interview. You can't say, hey, don't report on that after you already said it. Even if you say, hey, what I'm going to share is off the record, or you could use this on background. I think that there have been court cases that have said that a journalist is like a recording device. So no matter what you say to them, even if you say off the record, it can be used. So just don't say it if you don't want it recorded. One thing I would be very cautious about is using client details that are specific to them. I am not a person that believes in lying at all. I did a whole segment on trust, but this is one time where you, just to protect the innocent, kind of, you know, like the witness protection program, they changed their name. You might want to change a little bit of the client details, and I've used the example I think before of changing it from a man to a woman or a woman to a man, changing some of the numbers, changing the timeline, just change enough of the details where the point gets across, and it's not that you're exaggerating, it's just that you're trying to keep the client confidentiality something that's important. One big mistake is forgetting the name of the publication, or actually even the reporter's name. I am terrible with names, and I use technology. I really lean on it, but if you say the person's name wrong, you're going to damage that relationship, and you can apologize for it. I've actually done this before, and I felt like a fool, and I apologized, and I still think that the person kind of looks at me with one eye crossed, you know, like I was a fool, and the wrong name came out. And so if you can really stay on top of the press and their names, this is really valuable. Again, if you are at a conference and you don't have time to look something up, whether it's on your phone or your laptop or whatever it might be, where you're about to set up an interview, you have more time to prepare. But if you're just bumping into somebody, that's where you're probably at most at risk. You know, especially if it's a conference and there's a cocktail hour, or you're meeting them at dinner, something to be careful of. I talked about pitching something that isn't newsworthy. One of the big don'ts is just pitching something that's promotional. If it's a marketing speak, it does not make a good news segment. Too many times, like, people will hire a PR agency to get their kind of new product development out there, or their new service, or whatever it might be, or, you know, the acquisition of a company or whatever. It's kind of boring stuff, right? So have some story angle that the people digesting that news segment, whether it's, again, a video or a recording, or you know, maybe like an audio recording, or maybe it's an article. Make sure that they are going to get something out of it. Like, you know, you're trying to help them do their job. They're not there to help you do your marketing, right? So you have to have that mindset. You have to put yourself in their shoes, and you'll see all the time people that are pushing out content to the press, and it's just not going to work. And that's the type of disconnect that is all too common. So one of the things I would really caution you at, and when you work with a journalist too, you can actually kind of pick their brain for what they're looking for, and then you can, rather than push your marketing agenda, you can feed them what they want, and that can be really successful. So again, have something that the press wants, not something that you are trying to push. The press, they're very busy people. One thing that I'll see sometimes is they bury the lead, so to speak. So if you do push out a press release, it's like paragraph 3 that the news is. Like, you make it the first sentence, honestly. Make it as easy as possible. If they are really interested, they'll go into the next part of it. But everything that is newsworthy has to be front-loaded and up top. You'll even see that the members of the press sometimes write like that now, because we're all this ADD society. So make sure that you're actually getting your message across. It's clear and crisp and to the point up front, and it's not buried below paragraphs of text. There are times where you damage a relationship with the press by missing a deadline. So they've asked you to provide something by Tuesday at end of business day, and you don't get it to them till Wednesday morning. They might now have had to publish something and they were counting on you, and now they look bad because you didn't do your part. Make sure if you commit to a deadline that you'll be there for them. That's something that you just have to hold yourself accountable, because I know we're all busy and pulled in a lot of different directions and things come up. If you are in jeopardy of missing a deadline, please write to them and ask for an extension, or is that a hard deadline or a soft deadline? And sometimes they'll give you more time. But then I've seen people that get that extra time and then they don't deliver. One good example of this is like, you have a timeline or a deadline that's so far out and you kind of forget about it. So when I talked earlier about editorial calendars, you're like, hey, we're now in August, but you don't need this content till November to be published in December. And then November comes up and they haven't done anything. So make sure you use your CRM to create triggers and reminders and to-dos and whatever it might be to help you meet that deadline so you don't forget. Little alarms can be a nice way to hold yourself accountable, because we are humans and we get pulled in different directions. So don't miss any deadlines if you can possibly avoid doing that. A similar thing is standing up the press. So if you schedule a meeting, make sure you hold to it. Too many times the press gets really frustrated with somebody because they scheduled something to have a phone interview at 10 a.m. on Friday, and then they called and the person wasn't available. So make sure that you schedule it. Put a little buffer if you have a meeting in the morning and it's going to potentially go over. Know that that's the case, and schedule a little bit more buffer time so that you can make sure you finish that meeting and you're not late for the press. Being too aggressive is one that unfortunately is all too common. You are not the author of an article or a news segment, so they have the control over it, so you can't control how it comes out. That's just the risk of the press. If something's inaccurate, you can correct them, or if you think you're misquoted, you can maybe go back to them. But you don't get the opportunity, very, very seldom do you get the opportunity to review something and get it approved from your kind of marketing bend or your opinion or whatever it might be. So just be aware of that. You can't be aggressive. You can't, this kind of goes on the harassing thing and calling them too much. You can't be that way with, hey, this is the way that this has to come out. Otherwise, you're just not going to be successful with the press. One thing that kind of goes into that category of being too aggressive is forcing your compliance restrictions on them. So if you are somebody that has to have everything pre-approved before it gets published, you better have communicated that with the member of the press and got their agreement before you go start to talk with them, because they're going to assume after they've interviewed they can go off to the races. So you're either going to make them upset because now they can't use the content, or they're going to go ahead and use it, and then your compliance groups can be upset. So if you're in one of those industries, or if you have somebody in your own organization that wants to control the press too, you got to let them know that's not really the case. And so sometimes you might want to even have the compliance person in the room for an interview, or if you're going to send them an article, the compliance person can maybe scrub it before, but that can be a big no-no too, because if they put compliance speak in there, it's almost as bad as, it could be even worse than marketing speak. So be careful that your compliance burdens aren't ruining your relationship with the press and the content that you're trying to share. One that I've seen some really good people make the mistake of doing is not being honest. So the way that they kind of accidentally get into this is they exaggerate, or they kind of get down to this area where they're not an expert, and they start to fluff it a little too much. Or there's people that maybe just are completely dishonest. I don't work with them. I kind of can sniff them out, and I wouldn't work with them I hope I wouldn't work with them. But the reality is, be careful. The press are pretty smart people. They are always talking with people, and they can kind of sniff out a fraud. If they do catch you that not telling the truth, it's not going to go well for you. Then you can be either blacklisted, or worst case, they can call you out and you get negative publicity, which would not be good. So related to that is pretending to be an expert on the topic that you're being interviewed about. There are kind of two ways that are better to approach that. Is hey, if I get asked something I'm not an expert at, I can just be honest and say I'm not an expert, or I can just say, hey, I'd love to get you the information you want on that, but can you give me a little bit more time and I'll follow up with an email or another phone interview or whatever it might be. They'll appreciate that because they know they can still get what they want, but they also appreciate that you're being honest, and I think that will help you build that relationship. You know, if it's something that you're supposed to be an expert on and you're not, and you kind of fluffed it, they probably won't use you again, but at least you're not saying something that makes you look silly, that you're getting quoted and being a goofball. Earlier on, I said that it's beneficial to not be boring and to have that larger than life personality. One thing I would caution you with is humor. The funniest people, they say things that in the moment, everyone's laughing. If you're in the room, it's funny, but in text, it does not translate well and it comes out, looks horrible. So be careful with humor. I wouldn't say don't use it, because that's going to help you be a go-to with the press. They're going to love working with you, and maybe they can use it and make it translate in whatever they're trying to push out. But be careful that it can be misunderstood, and kind of in this day and age where you kind of have the PC police coming at you from all different angles. Be careful what the humor is related to, and kind of keep it where, like, I'm a baseball coach. What would I tell the 13-year-old boys that I coach? And another way to think about it is it a joke that would translate well with a grandmother, right? Like, kind of think of that audience in your head, and then be careful of how you deliver the humor, and make sure that you don't get yourself in trouble by mistake. Wrapping it up, one of the ideas you need to be careful with is over controlling the final product too. So once the person pushes out the article, are you asking for the pre-approval? Or once it goes up, are you micromanaging what they put in there? Like, hey, that's not what I said. Or, I think it's okay if you say, hey, you misspelled my name. That's an obvious one, that's okay. But if you say, hey, like, that wasn't what I was saying or whatever, like, it really has to be drastically wrong for you to go after them to rewrite something or ask for a correction. That might be the case if you're in some kind of controversial topic and they're kind of coming at you and you're being attacked. Hopefully you're not in those types of interviews. But I've just seen where someone gets positive press, but it's just not exactly how they had hoped. Or maybe the order of the paragraphs was off, or just like little silly things. I think one of the things that you'll see too is that I've said this before, you can't have a transcript as an article, right? So they'll take your quotes out, write it into a paragraph, and maybe they'll quote you once out of the 10 things you said, but the whole article is about you, or that whole section of the article is about you. And they get upset because, like, hey, they stole my ideas. Like, just know that they're not going to take every single one of your quotes and keep it in the quotation marks. So you can't go control that stuff after the fact. Inaccuracies, misspellings, that type of stuff is okay, but sometimes just let it go and go on to the next news segment that you're trying to do. So last thing I'll say is just being demanding in any way. So that one's related, demanding changes, demanding that they cover you, demanding anything. They do not work for you. That's the nice thing about publicity, is that there's some independent source that's creating this information for their audience. And so you have that risk. I've talked about that before, the risk of you're not going to get exactly what you want, but sometimes you'll get something that's even better than you hope for. There's a little bit of a risk there, so do not be demanding in any way with the press. They do not work for you. Remember that. And be careful even when you work with an outside agency to put demands on them too, because sometimes they just can't come through because it's something they can't control. My name is Mike Byrnes. These are a whole bunch of things that will hopefully keep you out of trouble and make you more successful. If you don't do them, they'll make you more successful in getting positive publicity. This has been another episode of Business Best. Thanks for tuning in.